Hi, everyone. Welcome. We'll get started in just a moment. Okay, I see it's a few minutes after, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good day, everyone, and welcome back to our Zowe Quarterly Update webinar series. I'm Rose Hatch. I lead the Zowe Onboarding Squad, and today I'm joined by Mark Ackert, the squad lead for the Zowe System Squad, and Mark is also currently leading our Event Management work group. Go to the next slide, please, Mark. So what we usually do in our quarterly webinars is we have a focus topic, and we spend the first 30 or so minutes talking about a focus topic. Today's topic is going to be Zowe Event Management. And then upon completion of that focus topic, we transition into providing you with some Zowe news and some upcoming events and other important information. So before I hand it over to Mark for today, I just want to review a few housekeeping items. The attendee microphones are muted. Our microphones obviously are not, so we'll be doing all of the speaking. However, if you do have a question, please feel free to go ahead and post it in either the chat or the Q&A, located, I think, at the bottom of your screen. One of us will be monitoring, probably me, and I'll make sure that Mark gets the question. In the event that we're not able to answer your question during the allotted time, we'll follow up with responses as soon as we can. And I'm thinking the best way for us to do that is probably through the Zowe Help OMP Slack channel. So please feel free to go ahead and look for it there. The webinar will be recorded for replay and will be available at the OMP YouTube channel. Look for the Zowe Quarterly Update playlist, and we'll give you a tip on how to easily locate that towards the end of the presentation. All right, I think that takes care of everything. So I will hand it over to Mark.
Okay, thanks, Rose. So, hey, everybody. As Rose mentioned, my name is Mark Ackert. I'm an engineer working in the Zowe community on an effort we're currently calling Zowe Event Management, and I'm here to talk to you about that today. Before I go into the details of what this is, I did want to put some really quick disclaimers on what we're going to be talking about today. Since this project is still very early in development, we actually just completed research and POC phase. What you're going to see today could change in the future, though we feel good about the general direction. And for the same reason, I'm going to avoid putting dates on anything here, including dates on when this may be available as a technical preview. For our purposes in this webinar, this is an early look into what we're working on. Okay, that disclaimer out of the way, I think we can ask the question, what is Zowe Event Management? Well, Zowe Event Management, it's a project focused on delivering common, vendor-neutral, standardized infrastructure for communicating IT events and data feeds between cross-platform applications in an asynchronous, loosely coupled, reliable, and scalable way. And that's a whole mouthful. So to unpack that a little bit, I think some background and context can, help explain or clarify, what that all means and why we're working on this project. And, we can do a better job of explaining this other than that, run-on definition that I came up with there. So to start with some of the background, this project was originally born from a use case that we have in the Zowe community for ourselves, and that was the Zowe Explorer for VS Code component. We wanted to be able to notify users in VS Code when a job they'd submitted through the Zowe Explorer extension was completed, as opposed to just, refreshing the job queue constantly to see when, you finally get CC0 or a SOC4. Refreshing is both an annoying user experience for anything but the shortest lived jobs, and it uses system resources every time you refresh, so it's also a little bit inefficient. A push-based method of learning about the end of job events from the mainframe solves both those issues, but it didn't align very neatly with some of the existing REST API models that we had in the community. We looked for an existing standard way of doing this, of providing cross-platform push-based capabilities, and found that there's really none available out of the box on the mainframe. So what already existed either required licensing or it was limited in some fashion and couldn't quite solve our requirements. Like some of the out-of-box components for eventing only do event notifications between different ZL pars, right? It can't go across platforms. And as we started researching this, we reached out to other vendors and other companies to see if they had similar requirements, and we found that they did. And by and large, up to this point, each company was solving this their own way. Sometimes they're solving it in a point-to-point fashion. Sometimes it was a product-by-product level. Sometimes they use a licensed product. Sometimes they used open source. So it was from this perspective which we felt that Zowe could step in and provide something valuable. And that was an open source, standardized way of pushing data between platforms, which could be used by everybody. Now, this capability we needed, which is the reliable way of pushing notifications from one platform to another over a network. It's not novel in general. You get push-based notifications on your phone, and you've probably been getting them for a long time. And some of you may have used IBM MQ already, which can, broker events and notifications between, off-platform business logic running in the cloud and Kix transactions, right? And IBM MQ has been around for a very long time. Without going into too much detail on each of these, service-oriented architectures, message-oriented middlewares, enterprise service buses, these are all storied architectural patterns with some nuanced differences, but they could all generally address our requirements. So we started looking there. And on the mainframe side, for reference implementations of these different kinds of architectures, MQ is an obvious choice, as I just mentioned, but it requires a license. And it's more oriented towards line of business data anyway. And for our use case, we're focused more on like IT ops or DevOps events, system events that impact, the monitoring and performance of the mainframe. And on the distributed side, we investigated Kafka, ActiveMQ, and RabbitMQ. These are all popular choices in their own right. These are open source Java-based technologies, and they were fairly different, 5 to 10 years ago, but today they share more in common than not. And all of them are more than capable of reliably communicating the events between different applications and platforms. So we had to pick just one to move forward with into a POC phase, and eventually we landed on Kafka as our choice. We decided this, based on both the industry standing of Kafka. It is broadly adopted. I think it has something like over 70% adoption at, top 500 companies, and that statistic was from maybe 4 years ago. And, we also got feedback from vendors as well as users that they were already looking into Kafka and they were experimenting with it anyway. So we saw a lot of different trends pointing towards the direction of Kafka. Right, and from there, I think it brings us to the question of how, selecting Kafka as, this event bus turns into something called Zowe Event Management. So from our perspective, we believe that the Zowe community can deliver two key components, the Zowe Kafka broker and the Zowe Kafka client stack. The Zowe Kafka broker is the central piece of the Kafka stack. This is the component that receives, persists, and sends out different events and messaging and data streams to all the registered consumers. The Zowe Kafka client stack, it's a collection of libraries that are used in tandem with Kafka clients, and it's intended as really an improved onboarding experience for the Kafka client technology in general. And I'll talk a little bit more about the broker in detail in the next slide and why we think we can deliver something there. But these two components together, they respectively create Zowe Event Management, right? Which is a vendor-neutral, open infrastructure that can be used for solving, systems and operations problems which require that async push-based notification. And, on the right here, I also called out, these are the types of things that we can do once this infrastructure is available for anybody to leverage, right? You can create all these different kinds of event feeds. So, for us in the Zowe community, we have job start and stop that's of interest to us. But for different vendors, their products may emit events that would be of interest to them to transfer to different off-platform applications. And, mainframe users may have their own site-specific processes or applications that are running that they would like to emit data from, right? And there's all these different applications that consume it. So job start and stop is something that we want to consume in the Zowe Explorer, but we could also consume that in other contexts, like Zowe Chat, or maybe a job ends and then you trigger like a Jenkins webhook, right? And so there's all these different third-party integrations like orchestrators, Jenkins, Service Desk, and then any other proprietary applications you may be running on your site. So the idea is that these are just completely decoupled. You have data feeds that go into the Kafka broker, and then consumers that are using that data feed to do something interesting. And just showing you the same thing in another way, but in a topological view. The Kafka broker, or the hub, sits at the center of all the different clients, all the different data feeds that are coming from the producers, and all the different consumers that are using that data feed to do something interesting. In most cases, people or applications that are connecting to the hub tend to be both producers and consumers. They may consume data, take an action, and then emit something back saying that they took that action. And what's shown here is, in this diagram, if you imagine on the left, this is the mainframe side of the diagram, and on the right, this is the distributed side of the diagram. And we'll be able to deliver using the Zowe client stack, event producers or libraries with which you can build your own event producers that can then communicate to the hub. And using that same client stack, you can then create consumers that attach to all these different contexts, like VS Code Explorer, chat clients, or other tools. Right, and all this event transfer and data transfer, it's again async and real time and scalable and reliable. So from there, I want to just spend a moment expanding on what we're hoping to deliver with the Zowe Kafka broker and the Zowe Kafka client. So right now, today, there's no installation guide or officially supported version of running the Kafka broker on Z. One of our goals for the Zowe Kafka broker is to make a consistent packaging of Kafka available and deployable on Z systems, and to do that following Z standard, operating procedures. So this could include, installing Kafka via PAX or SMPE, running it as a started task, and it could extend to other, operating systems running on the Z platform, like being able to run Kafka on Z Linux, and maybe eventually in the future running Kafka on ZCX on ZOS through ZCX containers. Excuse me. Our Kafka deployment is going to have an opinionated install and configuration, which is going to be tailored to the Z system. So we'll help set up Z-specific considerations like getting your ZFSs ready, as that's where all the data from Kafka is going to reside, and tuning common Kafka configuration common Kafka configuration parameters for the Z environment. And additionally, we think there's some opportunities for better Kafka operations and integrations on Z. Kafka by default ships with its own authentication and authorization constructs, which are good, but they're mostly tailored towards distributed identity providers. And they come with a custom authorization model as well. So one thing that we can do in the Zowe community is that we can extend some of those Kafka APIs so that the broker, instead of using those distributed tools, it can use SAF as the identity provider, which then allows you to authenticate to the Kafka infrastructure using your mainframe ID and principal of your choice, whether that's a password or a certificate. And additionally, we can also use SAF as the authorization provider. So if you want to limit access for certain users to certain data feeds within the Kafka infrastructure, well, now there's a SAF resource for that, right? You can just create a resource definition that Kafka will read and use to either approve or deny access to that data feed. And ultimately, right, that makes it so that the Kafka broker, it's a little bit easier to deploy and install on Z, and it operates like most of the other software that you're running on Z. Next up is the Zowe Kafka client. So the Kafka client is a collection of libraries which are used to connect to the Kafka broker. And these can be used to connect either as producers of events or data feeds or consumers of. Our goal for the client stack is really just to create an opinionated stack which acts as a great entry point for working with Kafka. We're providing this and building it not by rewriting or abstracting away Kafka libraries, but instead extending them and then giving you access to the underlying APIs directly. And that last point is really important because that means that all the available documentation and all those Stack Overflow threads you can find on how to work with Kafka libraries, those are still going to be applicable and useful towards what we're doing with the client. Like with the Kafka broker, we also think there's some opportunity for the client libraries to be better optimized for Z environments and include some platform know-how. We don't have a lot to announce on this yet, besides working with the SAF-based authentication and authorization that we can implement in the broker. But this is on our radar, and it's going to stay on our radar for a while. And lastly, we're going to have a wide range of opinionated standards for working with Kafka that will eventually find their way into something like a conformance criteria or a conformance program. This will include, but it's not limited to, things like message format and message schemas, such as using cloud events, data serialization, such as using Avro and Protobuf, consistent topic naming structures, and instrumentation using OpenTelemetry. We could do a deep dive on all these different topics at another time because they all deserve their own talk. And with that background, right? So with Zowe Event Management being this collection of the Kafka broker and the Kafka client, I wanted to just show you a really quick demo about how this works live. So going back to that first use case I mentioned for Zowe end of job events. So I've got here the Zowe Explorer installed in VS Code, and this is a custom version of the Zowe Explorer I've written, which uses Zowe Event Management to retrieve end of job events. So I've got two systems here. One of these is running a Zowe Event Management client, which can push end of job events, and one isn't. So I'll start by submitting a job from the system that doesn't have Event Management installed. And here you get the normal kind of workflow in VS Code Explorer, which is you submit the job, you hit the link, and then you start polling it, right? I'm just refreshing it to see when this thing is finished. And it says active here, but I know it's actually done. I think if I refresh it from here, I'll see CC 0, right? And then from there, as normal, you can go into the Jez log and read the output. But using Event Management, when I submit the job from this system, instead of needing to pull this, right, the idea is I can just go back and do something else. This job is going to finish pretty quickly. It's about 5 seconds long. But I can go switch context, do something else, and then VS Code is going to notify me when that job has been completed. Right? And if I click this link, it takes me right back to the same Jez context in Zowe Explorer. And this is, again, really quick, really simple, because a lot of what's happening is happening under the hood here as part of the infrastructure that we're building in Zowe Event Management. And I'd also, just like to reinforce one more time, this end of job notification I'm getting in VS Code Explorer, this is not a point-to-point solution where something is getting sent right back to my desktop. This end of job feed, this end of job process, this could be leveraged by many other applications contexts. So I'm not able to show it today, but I did have a working demo where this was able to send you a direct message in Slack when one of your jobs completed. And this uses the exact same tech stack and exact same data workflow. And with that, I didn't mean to stop sharing, but that was just about the end of my demo. Hold on.
We do have a couple of questions, Mark, whenever you're ready.
Yes. Okay. I'll head over to those in a second. The last slide I wanted to say was, this is a really high-level overview of what we're thinking about with event management, right? Common standardized infrastructure that lets you solve use cases just like the one we solved in the VS Code Explorer. If you have any ideas about this, any opinions on it, all your feedback is very welcome. You can reach out either to myself directly or Rose, or you can open issue in the community GitHub. We will read your feedback and get back to you. Okay, so let me look at the open Q&A questions. What if someone already had IBM MQ? Could the feeds or applications that you desire Kafka for be routed to MQ instead, so that additional concurrently running software is not needed? The feeds applications that you desire. So that depends. There is a way to transfer events from MQ to Kafka and vice versa. There's these things called Kafka connectors that will do just that. However, they still require the Kafka broker to be running, as far as I know. So if you wanted to push the data feed straight from the event producer on the system to MQ, that would not work. But if you pushed it to the Kafka broker, then the Kafka broker could mirror it to MQ. And of course, the opposite would be true. You can mirror MQ into Kafka. In general, though, I think some of our perspective on this is that we thought those technologies would be in different lanes, because MQ typically solves, live business application use cases, and we're trying to solve more internal development and IT operations use cases. What's the expected footprint of having Kafka to solve the VS Code use case versus alternative solutions? So the expected footprint of Kafka, I can speak to that directly. It varies a little bit. Kafka's footprint is primarily in the disk space it uses, which is configurable. So in some cases, the disk footprint could be as small as a couple megabytes. It could go all the way up to petabytes. It just depends on what you want to do with that data. If you want to keep it around forever, if you're okay with it disappearing after a week, a month, and so on. Let me see, the second part of that question. In terms of compute and memory consumption, Kafka is actually quite modest. It uses very little compute and just a little bit of memory, because like any other Java application, you need a little bit of heap allocated to it. The alternative solutions, comparably, their resource consumption may be similar, maybe a little bit smaller, but what happens is then you wind up with a sprawling set of point-to-point solutions. So we could solve, our requirements of the point-to-point solution. Vendors can continue solving their problems with point-to-point solutions. But eventually what happens is that lands up, I think, on user sites on the mainframe as just a collection of technology doing the same thing, and probably being wasteful in aggregate, much more so than just having a single Kafka instance. And also, I think, everybody doing it in a point-to-point way also adds longer-term configuration and maintenance burden to the environment. So having a single instance to do all this helps alleviate all those potential issues. If Zowe aims to ship Apache or SMP distributions of Kafka, does Zowe aim to support Kafka itself? I think we wanted to treat Kafka like we treat all the other open components we use today. So, we use Spring and we use Angular, and we, to the best of our ability, support or get support from the communities for those open technologies. I think we would do the same thing with Kafka. But that's something that, of course, we'll continue, I think, to discuss as this project moves forward. I think that was everything I saw in the Q&A. So I'll pass it back to you, Rose.
Hey, thanks, Mark, and thanks for the questions. Please continue to add more if you have more questions. Okay, Mark, are you seeing the new to you upcoming event?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, so let's just walk through some of the new or news to you slides, and we'll wrap this up real quickly. So just wanted to make everybody aware of the communication channels that we continue to iterate on at zowe.org. So for example, if you're interested in knowing what's happening or what's upcoming, we have an announcements banner at zowe.org. In our overview section, you have the ability to click on particular calendar events that we want to bring to your attention. Most recently, we are conducting Zowe V3 office hours for consumers. You'll find the information related to that in the link at the announcements section in the Zowe calendar. Similarly, if you would like us to send reminders or give you a direct email for upcoming events or important information, please consider joining our Zowe User mailing list. That is the only way that we can reach out to you directly without asking you to come to zowe.org or come to the Slack channels. So we highly recommend that you join that mailing list if you're not already a member. If you've missed a webinar and you're interested in going back to a prior webinar or replaying a webinar that you attended, you can find them on our YouTube channel that I mentioned at the beginning. The link to that YouTube channel, again, is on our zowe.org landing page, sort of midway down here where the third circle is located. We also post our latest Zowe roadmap there. And in the event that you would like to report an issue, we have a link to our GitHub repo and instructions on how to report issues. I also want to bring to your attention that we've done a little bit of revamping of some of our Slack channels in the spirit of trying to make it easy for all of you. We now have a Zowe Help channel and a Zowe Announcements channel. And as always, if you're unsure or uncertain as to where to turn with respect to a Zowe issue or for any assistance, please reach out to those of us on the onboarding channel and we'll make sure that we get you going in the right direction. Also, again, this is at our zowe.org landing page. If you page down, just for your awareness, there are a couple of upcoming conferences where we tend to mingle with all of our mainframe customers and provide lots of information related to Zowe. GSE UK virtual is happening in April 23rd to 25th. And then many of us are preparing for good Zowe content for the upcoming Share Conference in Orlando, beginning on March 3rd, going through March 7th. Happy to meet with any of you if you'd like to meet with some of the Zowe community. Important release information. Please take note of these dates, communicate them with folks within your organization, and with the intent of helping you and your organization prepare for what you may need to do, particularly those of you who are still running Zowe V1. Zowe V1 ends support on September 30th, so you have a little over 8 months to make your move to V2. V2 has been around for quite some time, and we do plan to continue to maintain that release for several years. That's the last date here. But walking through the timeline in date order, our final V2 active release will occur in early March. We plan to introduce Zowe V3 at the end of March. Zowe V1 will end its support at the end of September. The V2 will transition from an active release to the first maintenance release in May. And then V2 will end support over 2 years from now. So you've got plenty of runway if you're at V1 and you plan to upgrade to V2. Just a different view, sort of the same information. We are here in January and February where we are hosting our Zowe V3 office hours for consumers. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Then beyond February, we've got V3 planned for March. We talked about the final active release for V2. We talked about V2 transitioning to maintenance. And finally, for your awareness, the end of support for V1. So please, please, please do make your plans if you haven't already. Plan to upgrade to V2. As I mentioned, we are conducting office hours for Zowe V3. Office hours is a series of webinars that we're hosting every Friday at bright and early for those of us on the East Coast and out to the West Coast of the US, but they are recorded. The intent here is to help to prepare our audience, anyone using Zowe, anyone planning to use Zowe, to be ready for Zowe V3, to gain an understanding of what to expect in V3, what you may need to do if you're looking to upgrade from V1 or V2, new features, resources and contacts. For extenders, we ran a number of sessions directed at folks who extend or deliver Zowe CLI plugins, Zowe applications for the desktop, APIs, etc., to help prepare the extenders for any changes that are coming for Zowe v3 to ensure that all of our extenders achieve v3 conformance so that our consumer base can be confident when they upgrade to v3 that all of their interoperable extensions work as intended. If you're interested in the office hours, either the ones that we're running live, we started in early January, or the recordings, please visit zowe.org/vnext, and you'll see a link there for office hours. We post the recordings there. If you're interested in joining live, just click on the community tab at zowe.org, pull up the calendar that you see here on the right, look for the orange entries. That's how we've indicated the v3 office hours. And if you hover over any of them, you'll see the full details along with the meeting link and the schedule, as well as the agenda for each of the office hours. So hopefully you have joined and plan on continue joining us there. And then finally, for your awareness, Interskill has introduced a Zowe Foundations course. It is free to anyone who logs in to Interskill. You can be found at interskill.com /Zowe. It is, as I mentioned, it's available to all. There is a badge that you can earn if you take the course. And we do plan on continuing the collaboration with Interskill to introduce more free Zowe training courses, more advanced training courses in 2024. But for those of you who have folks, or for you yourself who would like to take a refresher on the basics of Zowe, for example, understand what all of the components are, how they interact with each other, just basic information with respect to Zowe. Does not go into extreme detail about installation and configuration, but it gives you a general idea. Please do consider taking this course and offering it to others within your organization. And with that, we'll just leave you with some upcoming tentative dates for our next quarterly update. This is the first of 2024. We plan to do 3 more throughout the year. We'll target April, August, and December. If you have topics that you would like us to discuss, please do share those with us through the Zowe Slack channels at OMP Slack. Consider joining our mailing list. And again, if you've missed one, the replays are available at the OMP YouTube playlist. And I think that covers everything. I'll give it one more minute to see if we have any questions at all, either related to event management or anything else we discussed. And I'll thank you, Mark, for your time and your fantastic overview. And thank you, everybody, for attending. I don't see any more questions. So we'll give you all about 25 minutes back. Thanks again. We'll see you next quarter.